The 2024 Ohio State football season is one like we've never seen before. The team entered the season with impossibly high expectations. National title or you're a failure. And while there were certainly some very, very high highs, along the way we also experienced devastatingly low lows. But it culminated in the most impressive national championship run the sport's ever seen. It was a true roller coaster. So with that said, hop aboard the ultimate college football roller coaster. To truly understand the 24 season, you have to go back to how the 23 season ended. Entering that year, Ohio State had lost 2 straight times to Michigan, and they felt like they'd been cheated out of a chance to achieve all of their goals by their biggest rival. And when they lost for a 3rd straight time, the future of their program was really in question. Their starting quarterback transferred out to go to Syracuse. The fan base was kind of all right with that, but what they were not all right with was losing to Missouri in the Cotton Bowl. That really put the future of the program in question, and there was a thought that their head coach was not the right guy. With the incredibly talented 2021 recruiting class now eligible to go to the NFL draft, it felt like the majority of the team's stars, the entire backbone of the team, was going to leave the program having never achieved any of its stated goals until they all decided to come back, which gave the 24 season a ton of hope, but also immense pressure and insanely high expectations. Adding to these expectations was the fact that the team brought in a really talented transfer class featuring Caleb Downs and Seth McLaughlin, both from Alabama. Beyond that, they brought in a generationally talented wide receiver prospect in Jeremiah Smith. Expectations could not be higher, and no one was hiding from it. From the team to the fans to the media, everyone knew this was natty or bust. The players themselves were saying it, the fans were expecting it, the pressure was on the team and Ryan Day to make it happen. And as we entered the season, it was time to go. With an incredibly talented roster, there was absolutely no doubt that the team was headed up on what would become the 2024 season roller coaster. Entering non-conference play, they had 3 very easy games against Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall, and they rolled through them as they should. The offense looked good, the defense looked great, and heading into Big Ten play, this team looked like it might be everything it was cracked up to be. And the first 2 games of Big Ten play went just about as smoothly. They beat Michigan State and Iowa by a combined 73-14. They were dominant, they looked awesome, and they were headed to Eugene to play Oregon to determine who would be the favorite in the Big Ten and potentially the favorite for the national title. This game was massive, the expectations were huge, and it turned out to be a classic. The game was back and forth the entire time. Both teams looked like legitimate national title contenders with amazing offenses and less than ideal defenses, but amazing all the same. The game came down to the last play where Will Howard slid just a little late to get into field goal position. With the clock hitting 0, the Buckeyes lost by 1, and they experienced the first dip in the 2024 roller coaster. But every one of their goals was still in front of them. Not only did the Buckeyes lose the game to Oregon, they also lost their left tackle for the entire year due to injury, meaning they were going to have to rework their offensive line in the middle of the year. Now, heading into Nebraska, all of Buckeye Nation was very confident. Nebraska had just gotten its absolute doors blown off by Indiana, and everyone just assumed Ohio State would do the same. But that was definitely not the case. The Buckeyes barely won, scraped by with a 21-17 victory that honestly didn't feel deserved. The offense looked inept. The offensive line looked horrible. There were serious questions about this team's ability to do anything on offense for the remainder of the year. Even though the team beat Nebraska, it was inarguable that this was the bottom of the roller coaster so far in the season. The offensive line didn't look like it had a chance, and they were playing Penn State and Abdul Carter the very next week. Things were looking bleak, but the Buckeye defense came through. 2 goal line stands in the game against Penn State led to them winning the game in a close but still secure fashion. And the Buckeyes were moving back up and were starting to feel like maybe they had found a little bit along the line that would keep them in the hunt for a national title. Now, the next 2 games were completely dominant. Ohio State combined to beat Purdue and Northwestern 76-7. The defense had gone to another level, and Ohio State's offensive line was figuring things out. Heading into the next week against Indiana, everyone was feeling pretty confident, knowing they were the more talented team, but it wasn't going to be easy. Kirk Cignetti's squad was undefeated. The offense was super efficient. This was going to be a real challenge, but the Buckeyes were up to the challenge. They delivered Indiana their first loss on the year, 38-15, in a game that honestly wasn't really that close. Ohio State's defense did whatever it wanted all game and completely shut down what was a super efficient Indiana offense all year. They couldn't do anything. Heading into the Michigan game, confidence was at an all-time high on the year. This team looked like the best team in the country, and Michigan didn't have a quarterback. They were 20-point favorites heading into that game, and everybody knew this was the time Ryan Day gets revenge. But if you're watching this video, I'm sure you already know that is not what happened when they played the game on November 30th. Ohio State never got out of neutral on offense, running the ball directly into the middle of the Michigan defense, playing into the only possible game plan Michigan had to win the game. And that's what they did. They won 13-10, and after the game, the Michigan players decided they were going to plant the flag on the middle of the Ohio State field, and the Ohio State players weren't having it. Led by Jack Sawyer, an all-out brawl took place. They had to break it up with pepper spray. It was a disaster. And it wasn't just a disaster on the field. After the game in the following weeks, media and fans were calling for Day's job, thinking he was definitely not the right guy at this point. This was clearly the lowest point Ohio State had on the season, but also in the last 10 to 20 years. But because of the new 12-team playoff system, the season wasn't over despite suffering its second loss on the year and its fourth straight loss to Michigan. They were still going to make the playoffs, and they ended up actually getting a home site game against Tennessee. Now, the fan base, the media, everyone really was curious what this Michigan loss would do to the team as they headed into the playoff. Most people thought it was going to be a challenge to recover from such a devastating loss on such a big stage, but the Buckeyes did it. Despite real doubts from the Ohio State fan base and Tennessee fans claiming they were going to pack the shoe, Ohio State came out with their hair on fire. The offense was explosive. The defense was completely stifling, shutting down Tennessee completely, which led to a 42-17 win, which once again really wasn't that close. And Ohio State was moving on to play Oregon out in Pasadena. They were back. But a rematch against the undefeated Big Ten champion Oregon Ducks was going to be anything but easy. Or at least that's what everyone thought until Ohio State came out and absolutely blitzed the Ducks from the beginning in the Rose Bowl. The game wasn't even close. Ohio State was on fire, and it was over in the first half. The second half was mostly a scrimmage. Backups got in. The Buckeyes only scored once. It was domination, and they were moving on to play Texas in the Cotton Bowl, a Texas team in the state of Texas. It was going to be tough, and they were just one step short of their ultimate goal of winning a national title. The roller coaster was heading straight up at this point. After two straight clinical wins against good competition, the Buckeyes were clearly unlocking the insane potential that they had and that everybody assumed they had from the beginning of the year. The Michigan loss was in the rearview mirror, and they were heading into Dallas with one goal in mind: win a national title. But they were up against a team that had a clear home field advantage and a very stout defense. This was not going to be the dominant first quarter that won them the game. It just wasn't. And that's not how the game went either. It came down to the fourth quarter when Jack Sawyer strip-sacked his former roommate, former Buckeye, Quinn Ewers, and took it to the house. An 83-yard scoop and Sawyer to win the game. They were going to the national title, and they looked like an absolutely unstoppable force. Heading into the national championship against Notre Dame, Ohio State was at an all-time peak in confidence. The roller coaster was at the top. There was just one more team standing in their way from achieving their ultimate goal of winning a national title, but it was not going to be easy. Everyone assumed they were going to win. They were even 9-point favorites on some betting sites, but Notre Dame was not going to beat themselves. They were well coached, and despite having slightly less talent, especially at the skill positions, they were going to give Ohio State a fight. And they did. They weren't going to come out and roll over and let Ohio State win a national title. They were on scholarship too. And they made it tough. But ultimately, Ohio State pulled it through. They won a national title. Natty or bust came to fruition, and they weren't going to bust. The Michigan loss was an all-time low for the program, but the rebound from that was special. It almost took a devastating loss like that to really appreciate just how good of a run this would be. They beat the brakes off Tennessee at home in their first ever home site playoff game, beat the #1 team in the country, Oregon, on the West Coast, Texas in Dallas, and beat Notre Dame to win the national title. No team has ever had a more difficult path to win the national title in the history of the sport. It was special, and it was such a roller coaster ride. Ups and downs from the beginning, but it came to a gentle and rewarding stop in the national title in Atlanta. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Put in the comments suggestions for other videos like this. This is a new style for me. Any feedback would be appreciated. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later.